Well, we're here. Oh, well, already Jennifer and Camilo are here, so we can start. Guys, this week we're going to be working on two different topics, but everything goes around in terms of unreal situations, no? This week we're going to be working about unreal situations and how to describe them, right? When we are thinking about our lives, many times we engage in imaginary situations, in imaginary scenarios, right? In which we think that something could happen. Sometimes the situation it's kind of unreal because it's a far possibility. Like for example, I don't know that had an accident, had an accident. It's kind of, I mean, it's possible, but it's a far possibility because I don't drive. So I mean, for having an accident, it would be like, oh my God, exceptional situation. But it's possible because everybody can have an accident, right? And others unreal situations are situations that are simply impossible, right? Like, for example, had superpowers. Superpowers, right? So for example, having superpowers like speed or flying or something like that, it's impossible. That's not real. So in this case, when we work about unreal situations, we have those two different types of situations, like imaginary situations that they are possible, but they are a far possibility, like a small possibility, or situations that are simply 100% impossible, right? Now, guys, in that case, we're going to answer one simple question that we have right here. Mrs. Jennifer, could you please help me to read it, dear?
Hello, teacher. Yes. What would you do if today were the last day of your life?
Excellent. What would you do if today were the last day of your life? So, of course, that here we are facing, or we are thinking in a imaginary situation. The imaginary situation is that today is the last day of my life. O sea, that tomorrow I die. But it's imaginary, of course. It's not really possible. I mean, we are young people, we are in the prime of our lives. It's not very possible that tomorrow we die, no? So, this is an imaginary situation. It's possible, but it's a far possibility. It's a small possibility. Ready? And the question is, what would you do in that case, right? For example, if tomorrow, no, sorry, if today, bueno, tomorrow, because today is about to finish. If tomorrow were the last day of my life, I would travel, I would travel to Italy. I would travel to Italy with my family, and I would visit the Roman Coliseum, the Roman Coliseum. That's what I would do. Imagining that tomorrow were the last day of my life. No, so because I would have to travel to Italy, that are like 9 hours flying. So in that case, that's like all what I would do tomorrow. No, in an imaginary case, right? What about you guys? What would you do imagining or supposing that tomorrow were the last day of your life? What do you think? Any ideas? What would you like to do in the last day of your life? Me.
Teacher,
Hmm?
mm, I would travel with the people who love me to many countries. So it's special for me share with them.
Good. When I say my loved ones, es como mis seres queridos, my loved ones, right?
Okay.
Good, excellent. So travel with my loved one, bueno, with your loved ones to different countries. But you have only one day. Probably you could visit probably two countries, maybe no more. Because you
Okay.
have one day.
Yes. For the time. Yeah.
What countries would you like to visit in your last day of life?
is Spain.
Spain, good.
And mm, 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 I don't remember what do you say? Suiza,
Oh my God,
Scotland?
that is
No,
Escocia.
Switzerland.
Switzerland, muy bien. Because Scotland is Escocia. That's the other one.
Yeah,
This is
yes,
Switzerland. Muy bien, very
yes.
good. So visit Spain and Switzerland. Yes, it's possible, right? Very good. Thank you, Cami. Thank you so much. What about Laura, my dear? What would you like to do in your last day of life?
I would travel to as Camilo around the world to Europe, and I would hug my mom too.
Okay, so travel with your mom, but you only have one day, so you can choose one place. Not all Europe because it's not enough time, but one place. What place would you like to visit?
Rome.
Okay, good. Más bien, see you there in Rome, right? Muy bien, so travel to with her mom to Rome. Muy bien. And Jennifer, what would you like to do, dear?
um, I will do something that I will never do in life.
Like what?
Um, like jump for the high altars or I don't know. Es que no sé cómo decir esas actividades en inglés. Pero como,
Skydiving
yes,
or parachuting?
yeah, o sea, something like that. Eh, for la adrenalina and the experience.
Adrenaline, for the adrenaline. That's great. That's great. Very good. Like, for
Yes.
example, bungee jumping or something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, great. Great idea, Jen. And Nico, my friend, what about you, bro?
Maybe a fusion of the last ideas. I will travel with my loved ones to near city like San Andres or something similar, and I do different activities like scuba diving or eat a lot of food, drink a lot of drinks. I don't know. Spend my time with my family in general.
Very good. Yes, scuba diving, it's great. Also, kite surfing, no? Do you know what is kite surfing?
Yes, so fun.
Yeah, good, excellent. Right. Very good, guys. So, in that case, we are just imagining that tomorrow it's the last day of our life, but it is not. It's just an imaginary situation. This is going to be unreal. Ready? So, when we work with an unreal situation, yes, and the unreal consequence of that situation, we are likely to use the second conditional. Ready? The second conditional, it's going to be a conditional sentence, of course. So two sentences together that are used when we talk about a hypothetical situation. Yes. And the condition, sorry, the consequence of that crazy situation. No? So we have imaginary conditions, and that conditions cause or produce an imaginary consequence. But nothing of that is real. We are just imagining. Nothing is real. Everything is imaginary and it's unrealistic, right? In this case, guys, as every conditional, we're going to have two different parts. The first part, it's the condition, right? The condition, the condition, and then the second part, it's the consequence, right? The condition, it's that part that starts with if, and then it's going to introduce a situation that we want to analyze. If that situation happened, what will be the consequence, right? But in this case, the condition has to be hypothetical. It's not real. Hypothetical. It is not real. Okay? So we have if, then we have the subject, and then we have a verb, a situation. But that verb is going to be in past. Why? Not because the situation is in past. No, it's because the sentence or the situation is unrealistic. So in English, when we want to describe something that is hypothetical, that it's imaginary, we use the verb in past. Ready? So this verb it's going to be in simple past, but because it's unreal. Again, I mentioned here that this is unreal. And then of course we have the complement, and that's it. That is the condition. Okay. Then we have a comma to match condition with consequence, and then we introduce the consequence. The consequence is going to be start by using the subject. Remember, the subject can be the same as this one or can be a different one, right? Then we have the modal verb. In this case, in the second conditional, as this is hypothetical, it's a far possibility. So we use normally would, but it's possible that we can also use could or sometimes may. And then we have the verb. That verb it's going to be in the infinitive form, in the basic form. And then we have the complement, and that's the consequence of the condition. Teacher, what is the difference between using would, could, or may? Well, there is not big difference, just that in that case, when I use would and the verb, that verb is going to be used with ia. For example, si mañana si hoy fuera mi último día, yo viajaría, ¿cierto? Yo iría, yo practicaría when I use would. But when I use could or may, I said podría and then the verb in infinitive. Yo podría viajar. Yo podría practicar. Yo podría estar. Right? So in that case, guys, that's the difference, but it's not a big difference. It's just like saying like these two are more talking about ability or possibility, you know, like podría hacer tal cosa, right? And this one is just transforming the verb into ia, and that's it, right? So in that case, guys, for example, we have this question. Where would you go, verbo en infinitivo, if you won a trip anywhere? Won is the past tense of what verb?
Win.
Exactly, win. So in that case, the question is, ¿a dónde irías si tú te ganaras un viaje a cualquier parte? Right? So, Cami, help me to read the first example, brother.
Okay, teacher. If I want a trip, I would go to Indonesia.
To Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Very good, excellent.
Yes, teacher.
So in that case, the first part, it's the condition. If I want a trip, I am repeating the condition that they asked me for. If I want a trip. Then the second part, it's the consequence. I would go to Indonesia, right? So the verb is in past, the subject is the same in both sentences, and then we have would go, and that's it, right? Hmm. Oh, of course, I can introduce first the consequence and then the condition. I would go to Indonesia if I want a trip, right? So in that case, here we have condition and consequence. Here is the opposite, consequence and condition, but it's exactly the same idea. The only difference is that when I have if in the middle, I do not have to use a comma. That's the only difference. But on the other side, everything it stays the same, right? Hmm? Mrs. Jennifer, help me to read the next example, dear. This one.
Um, if I want a trip, I will travel to Japan.
Very good. If I want a trip, it's the condition. I would travel to Japan. In the original question, the verb was go. But in the answer, I answer with travel. Is it possible? Yes, of course. I can change the verb according to the question. No, so if I want a trip, I would travel. But anyway, the question was different, but doesn't matter. I can use any verb that I want as far as it goes correctly with the rest of the context. Okay. Or I can simply introduce the consequence. You know what? I would visit Paris and go to Spain. In what condition? If I want a trip. but I already have a question. So it's not necessary to introduce again if I want a trip because that is of course obvious from the last context, right? Same with the example of the last day of your life. You didn't tell me like, teacher, si mañana fuera otra vez, if today, ta, ta, ta. No, you just said I would travel to San Andres. I would drink a lot of drinks with my family and my loved ones. I would practice stream activity or something like that. Sin necesidad de repetir la condition, right? But that is optional. And I can also include two verbs. I would visit Paris and go to Spain, right? So I would, one and two actions, visit and go with one modal verb. Yes, I would do this and I would do that. But if I use one subject, then I just have to use one modal verb, right? And the opposite, I would go to Italy, France, and Germany. This verb, go, applies for Italy, for France, and for Germany. One verb, different items or different nouns in the complement part. Okay? So that's the second conditional. Includes would and simple past. Why? Because it's an unrealistic situation. Okay? How do you feel, guys? Questions, difficulties, clear, not clear? Más o menos so far.
It's clear for now.
Okay.
Yeah, clear, teacher.
Yes, no problem. Great. Excellent. Guys, what is the difference between using the first conditional and the second conditional? Because we know that we have different types of conditional. The first conditional is very similar. The only difference is that the first conditional is for something that it's possible to happen, right? The second conditional is for something that it's unreal, that it's not possible, that it's very improbable to happen, right? The first conditional, it can happen, it's something possible. And in the first conditional, remember that we are going to use will, can, or may, and the verb it's in simple present, right? So, for example, let's say here, a ver, let's talk about one action that it's, oh, sorry, um, lose a job, lose my job. Better. Yes. Is that possible or it's unrealistic? It's a hypothetical situation or it's a possible situation?
Possible.
It's
It's
possible.
possible.
Yes, of course.
Possible,
It's
teacher.
possible, right? So I am going to use the first conditional, not the second, because that is possible. If I wait, let's give more space. If I lose my job in infinitive, in present, because it's first conditional, I blah blah blah. See, I will blah 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 prepare my curriculum, my CV, my curriculum vitae. Yes, but what is the modal verb that it goes here?
Will.
Mm, will.
Will, because it's first conditional. Very good, great. Now, on the other hand, if I say something like, for example, uh, lost my memory. What do you think? Is that possible or kind of hypothetical?
Possible.
Yes? I mean, it's possible, but it's a far possibility. Yeah, because lost the memory, it's not something that it happens to many people. No, it's kind of, it can happen, of course, it could happen, but not so frequently. Yes, it's something that happens, but as an exception. Yes. So here I can apply the second conditional because lost my memory, it's like not something that happens to every person or it doesn't happen every day. No, it's something that it's like a mystery, like something like, oh my God, what would I do? Imagining that I had that situation, right? So if I, then it's not going to be lose, it's lost in past because it's second conditional, of course. If I lost my memory, I blah blah blah, I don't know, be lost. What is the model we're using here?
Would.
Of course, I would be lost. That is something that is less possible, right? It's like estaría perdido, right? So in that case, it's less possible. So that's how can you identify second conditional or first conditional. The situation is something possible or not possible. In the first conditional, this is something possible. Yes. On here, in the second conditional, it's something hypothetical. Let's call it hypothetical because it's possible, but it's not a real possibility. It's a far possibility. And then also you can identify because the verb it's in present in the first conditional and it's in past in the second conditional. And also because in the consequence part we have would, yes, it's like ia, yes, yo estaría, yo iría, yo haría, yo viajaría, or will, which is like future. If it's with I, it's haré, ¿cierto? So I prepararé, yeah, because it's more realistic. It's something more possible. So that's the difference between the first and the second condition. Okay. Now, guys, is it clear the difference between the first and the second conditional?
Yes, teacher. It's clear.
Okay, very good. Now, guys, in the second conditional, we know that in the consequence, we're going to use could, would, or may, and then the very infinite. That verb applies for any verb. Doesn't have difference between verb to be. No, it's the same with all the verbs. For example, no, 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 si ta, ta, ta cosa, yo sería, I would be. Yo iría, I would go. Yo tendría, I would have. Yo comería, I would eat. All the verbs are going to be exactly the same here. Yes? It doesn't have any distinction because it's just the verb infinitive in the basic form, so it doesn't matter. But in the condition, it's a little bit different. I am going to use normally the very past, like for example, if I went to space, if I had superpowers, if I ate a snake, if I don't know, if I got the lottery, for example, no, in past. But when we have verb to be, we know that we have two different possibilities for the past. Can be was or can be were. Yes, normally when we talk about verb to be in past is was or were. But in the second conditional, the only possibility for realizing that it's something unreal, that it's something imaginary, it's using only were. We're not going to use was, but were with all the pronouns. So in that case, if I were, if you were, if we were, if he were, if they were, if she were. When we are going to use verb to be, we're going to use were with all the pronouns independently if it's third person, first person, second person. Doesn't matter. We're going to use were with all the pronouns, right? Of course, only if it's verb to be. Si yo fuera, o si yo estuviera, o si ella estuviera, o si ella fuera. Only in that case, we're going to use were. If I say si yo tuviera, pues had. Si yo comiera, ate. Si yo obtuviera, got. Right? That's it. But si yo fuera, if I were. ¿Listo? Never if I was. Sin embargo, guys, ustedes van a encontrar, seguramente se han encontrado en canciones, series, películas, en, digamos, contenido real, que ellos usan if I was. ¿Sí? Entonces uno dice, profe, pero ¿cómo así? ¿Cuál es la correcta? La correcta gramaticalmente es if I were. Ahora, por uso, hay personas que usan igualmente if I was, ¿cierto? Como que no saben bien la regla, entonces usan igualmente if I was, ¿right? ¿Lo van a encontrar? Sí. ¿Es correcto? No. ¿Es usado? Sí. ¿Pero lo tenemos que usar nosotros? No, porque nosotros no hablamos como ellos, ¿right? Nosotros vamos a seguir una serie de reglas de inglés estándar, ¿vale? Claro, si tú quieres hablar en slang, pues ya puedes usar if I were o if I was, cualquiera de los dos, pero según el estándar, vamos a usar if I were, o if she were, o if we were. Listo, guys, ready? So, for example, we have if I were taller, Please complete the sentence. If I were taller, what would you do if you were taller?
I could play better basketball.
That is a common answer, but yeah, very good, of course. I could play basketball better. Very good. Great. So he's using could and the verb infinitive. Could play. Very good. ¿Qué más? What would you do if you were taller?
Teacher, if I were taller, um, I may be more popular,
Very
for
good. I
example.
may be more popular. Very good. Why not? Exactly. That's great. Right? So in that case, si yo fuera, verb to be, right? If I were taller, I would be more popular. I may be more popular. Whatever. ¿Listo? Bueno, my dear girls, Lau and Jennifer, complete this one. If I were younger, if I were younger,
If I were younger, I could go out more.
excellent. If I were younger, I would go out more. How old are you, Han?
32.
Ah, we're the same age. Good. Yeah, we in this age we just want to just, sleep in. Okay, very good, great. And Jennifer, my dear,
If I were younger, I would study em, como alguna maestría.
a master degree.
Como esta-
Very good. I would study a master degree. Perfecto, yeah, excellent, right? All of that, it's because I'm using si yo fuera. But of course, I can change it and say si yo tuviera, si yo estuviera, bueno, si yo estuviera también sería con if I were, right? But, y si yo obtuviera, si yo hiciera tal cosa, si yo estudiara tal cosa, si yo viviera en tal lado, right? Using the verb in past, right? And then the consequences with would or could or may. Ready? Bueno, my dear people, so far so good, right? Give me 1 second. I'm checking here. Okay, got it. Great. So I am looking for some material here. 1 sec, 1 sec, 1 sec.
Profe, una pregunta. ¿Yo
Yes.
puedo poner después del were otro verbo en pasado? Digamos, si yo me hubiera encontrado mucho dinero en un lugar, que es una de las actividades de la plataforma, se dice if I were found a lot of money o
No, if I found.
I had found.
Eso, es que ahí ya, digamos que no sé por qué ese tema está incluido ahí, porque en ese caso, si yo hubiese encontrado en el pasado, eso es tercer condicional. Mira que el condicional 2, les muestro acá. El condicional 2 habla de situaciones hipotéticas, pero en el presente o en el futuro. Entonces, cuando yo digo si yo hubiese encontrado, es situaciones hipotéticas, pero en el pasado, ¿right? Y ahí sí tengo que usar had y otro verbo. Pero entonces cuando yo uso el verb to be, es solo verb to be. ¿En qué caso puedo usar verb to be y otro, digamos que verbo en pasado? Cuando el verbo está funcionando como un adjetivo. Por ejemplo, tengo married. Married es casarse en pasado, pero también es el adjetivo casado, ¿sí? Entonces, por ejemplo, si yo quiero decir, si yo estuviera casado, if I were married, pareciera que estuviera usando were y otro verbo, ¿cierto? Pero realmente no. Realmente lo que estoy haciendo es usando were y un adjetivo. ¿Sí, Lau? Más o menos.
Ah, ok, sí, ya
¿Sí?
entendí.
O por ejemplo, no sé, let's say, el adjetivo despedido. ¿Sabes cómo es? O contratado, más bien, hagámoslo más feliz. Contratado es hired. También es el verbo contratar, ¿cierto? Entonces yo puedo decir, si yo contratara a alguien, sería if I hire someone. Si yo contratara someone. Pero si yo fuera contratado, then if I were hired. Donde hire no está trabajando como verbo, sino como adjetivo, como, sí, como característica del sujeto. Ok,
Sí,
bien,
claro,
listo.
ya entendí, gracias.
Perfect, no problem. All fine. Do, 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 do. I am looking for something, but I don't find it. Okay, all right. Guys, imagine that you were fired and you couldn't find another job. What would you do? What would you do if you didn't find job easily? You were fired, you were unemployed, and what would you do if you didn't find job easily?
If I were fired, I would find another possibility as like a mastery or an specialization or something like that.
Oh, so you would prepare better for another job.
Yes, prepare better.
That's a great mentality. Okay, very good, dear. So you would prepare better. Excellent. Anybody else? What would you do?
In a possible environment, if I could find a job easily, maybe I could try to start with another kind of business. I don't know who is the word, the emprender.
Yeah, enterprise, but what kind of enterprising? Like a restaurant or selling car
Maybe
parts or
selling something.
maybe
I
what, sorry again?
will
Sorry.
import something and sell in my city.
Okay, very good. Yeah, could be. That's right. Okay, Nico, thank you so much. Anybody else? My dear Laura, Camilo, what would you do?
Um, I don't know, teacher.
Mhm.
Um, mm. The only solution is prepare.
Prepare.
Prepare, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm, yes, I don't know other options in right now.
Okay, very good. That's it. Ready. Guys, that's easy when we work with these kind of verbs. Ready? But I'm going to ask you one question. Well, the next picture is this one, right? The question is, ¿qué harían si hubiese otra pandemia? Pero quiero que ustedes mismos hagan la pregunta. ¿Qué harían si hubiese otra pandemia? Entonces, what would you do? Esa parte pues es igual. What would you do if? Y ahí les dejo. Si hubiese otra pandemia. ¿Cómo sería el hubiese o hubiera? Es decir, el verbo haber, pero en forma, digamos que hipotética.
If had,
No, because that is tener.
mm,
What do you think, Nico? ¿Qué dices?
No, I
There were.
Muy bien, very good. Recuerden que el verbo haber en inglés no existe. Tengo que hacerlo a través de la combinación there is o there are. Co- Sorry, como estamos hablando de situaciones hipotéticas, el is o el are, ya sabemos que lo vamos a cambiar a pasado, pero ya vimos que el verb to be en pasado solo será were. So, what would you do if there were another eh, pandemic? So, what would you do, guys? What would you do if there were another pandemic? Any ideas?
maybe I will prepare with a lot of kinds of entertainment because it's the most important part when do you have spent a lot of time in your house.
Exactly. When you are isolated at home, there need to be something to entertain, right? Muy bien. So he would prepare with a lot of entertaining, like different possibilities according to everybody. Muy bien, Nico. What about you, girls or Camilo? What would you do in that case?
Teacher, I get a virtual job.
I would get.
Yes, teacher. I would get
Mhm.
a virtual job
Of course, you would get an online job. Yes, a virtual job in that
online.
case. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Cami, very good. Yes. My dear ladies, Laura, Jennifer, any ideas?
Teacher, if there were another pandemic, I will have more food in my house because after the food is expensive, will be expensive.
Okay, that is true. Currently, not all kind of food because some food can expire, no? For example, fruits at
Yeah.
home, they will expire. Okay, okay. Very good, Jennifer. Thank you. And Laurita, what do you think?
I could pay attention to the recommendations.
Okay. But later they are telling us like, okay, you should put alcohol into the fruits, and then we are following those kind of recommendations. Okay, very good. Thank you. So in this case, my dear people, you could see that there are many different variants of the second conditional. Si hubiese, si fuera, si tuviera, si hiciera, si comiera, si consiguiera, different verbs, and then the consequence, no? So with would, with could, with may, it depends on you. You can play. You can play with the two parts and do it as you feel more comfortable, right? First the consequence, then the condition. First the condition, then the consequence, as you prefer. Okay. Now, my dear people, we're going to find here. I'm sorry, I am looking for here. I my God, no, wait. Like that. Exactly. That's the way. So it says, rate at the action below and choose two. Well, just choose just one of these actions. Ready? And ask your classmates about if they have or haven't this experience, but this is not wait. I know this is not the one that I was looking for. You know, I did one, I opened the incorrect file. Sorry. I need to download another one. Wait. It will take me just 1 second. Right here. This is the one. I am so sorry. Oh my God. Right. So, guys, ahora sí, let's read it about. It says, look at the actions below and choose one and ask your classmates what they would do in that case. We have 7 situations. Live abroad in another country, be rich, your ex comes back, have powers, talk to animals, be other gender, like the other sexual gender, and don't have to work. Choose one of the situations, choose one of your classmates, just one of your classmates, and ask directly the question. So your classmate is going to answer to the question directly. For example, I am going to start. Yes, so I'm going to find, let's say, Laura. Laura, my dear, what would you do? What would you do if you talked to animals? What would you do if you talked to animals?
Mm, I would I would ask if they love us or if my pet loved me or
Very
something like
good.
that. What
Okay,
uh,
so,
what what does he think about me?
ok, cuando es, en ese caso no es una pregunta, sino es como una afirmación, lo que piensa de mí. So, en ese caso nos sobra el auxiliar. I would ask my pet what
Oh
he
yes.
thinks
What is he think about me?
of me or about me. Muy bien. Very good, Lau. Ujú. Listo, Lau. Ahora it's your turn. Find one of your classmates, Camilo, Jennifer, or Nicolas, and ask one of the questions down here.
Mm, Camilo, what would you do if you become rich, or if you are rich? No, what would you do if you were rich?
That if you were rich. Muy bien, Lau.
Um, I um, will
Because
be
it's second
no.
condition.
Okay, I would be very excited for the a lot of money and travel and yeah, I'm traveling and spend the money.
Ahí tienes que volver a empezar, Cami, desde I and I would travel and spend the money. Es cuando tienes
Okay.
conectores, hay que volver a iniciar la oración desde el sujeto. Entonces ahí incluiste como el conector y. Por lo tanto, la siguiente parte hay que volver a iniciar. Y
Okay.
yo
Okay.
viajaría and I
Okay.
would travel too. ¿Mm? Listo, Cami. Muy bien.
Okay. Teacher.
Find one of your classmates and make the question. Choose Jennifer or Nicolás. Coge a Jennifer o Nicolás y le preguntas, Camila.
Jennifer, what will you do if mm, you were um, live abroad?
Bueno, en ese caso no hay necesidad de incluir el word, Cami, porque el verbo es vivir solamente. ¿Sí? Entonces es what would you do, no con will, sino con would. Con will sería para el primer condicional, pero en este caso, digamos que es segundo condicional. What would you do
If you were live abroad?
sin el word? Solo if you live.
Sí, you live abroad.
Exactly. What would you do if you
You
live?
lived abroad.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yes.
Teacher abroad es como en el extranjero,
Yes,
¿cierto?
exactly like that.
Ok. I will study the language if the country have or another language that not Spanish.
That is not
And
Spanish.
that is not Spanish, yes. And I will meet people to know the city and the places, something like that.
Marvelous. So the first thing, very logical, she would learn the language if it's not Spanish. Good. And then
Yeah.
she would meet other people to know the places and the city and everything, right? Very good, Jennifer. Muy bien. So, Jennifer, question to Nicholas, please.
Okay, Nicholas, what would you do if you had powers?
Hmm. And that depends the power, but if I will have powers, I travel around the world if I could fly in this case, or read her minds. I don't know. That depends the power.
Exactly. So, the first question, if you had superpowers, what power would you like to have?
I I prefer
I would prefer.
I will prefer to fly because I
Okay.
can travel around the world.
Okay, very good. So, then in that case, well, if I had superpowers, I would prefer to fly. So, if I could fly, I would travel around the world. No, it's like a line, is a chain of ideas. The first answering to the question of the powers, and then what would you do with that power? Okay, Nico, right?
Okay, thank you.
Listo, my friend. Great. Okay, very good, guys. So, well, basically, this class it was super simple because it's just about the second conditional, which is one of the easiest conditionals to use. Remember, the verb it's in past, yes, and the condition, sorry, the consequence is with would and the verb, right? All of these were the conditions. So all of this were accompanied with a big if, si esto pasa, right? So for example, if I lived abroad, if I had powers, if I were rich, if I talked to animals, right? If I were of the other gender, so on, so on. If my ex came back, doesn't matter the subject here, the subject. En todo esto será I, ¿cierto? If I lived, if I were, if I. In this case, it's my ex, but doesn't matter if my ex came back, yes, in past. Yeah. And what about this question? It says, si yo no tuviera que trabajar, how would you make that question? ¿Cómo harían esa pregunta? Si yo no tuviera que trabajar.
What would you do if you hadn't? No.
My God.
If you hadn't, no,
Ese sería
to work.
tercer condicional, que es si no hubieses tenido que trabajar, que es con had
W-
y el verbo en para en past participle. ¿Cami?
Okay, teacher. A question. Em, si fuera, bueno, en español, digamos, si estuvieras viajando con el continuo,
Pasado continuo,
¿también?
usamos pasado continuo, sí. En ese caso, cuando es pasado continuo, ahí sí hay que usar were y un
Ajá.
verbo en ing, pero el verbo que va después de were iría en ing, no en pasado,
ING.
sino en ing. Por ejemplo, what would you do if you, ay, perdón, if you were traveling and you lost your passport. ¿Sí? Entonces, ¿qué pasa? Ese sí se puede, Cami, pero funciona solo como una contextualización. ¿Qué pasaría si estuvieras viajando y perdieras? A la final, la condición real sigue estando en simple past. ¿Ready? Esto solamente funciona como un contextualizador de la condición.
Ok, teacher.
¿Listo, men? Pero bueno, entonces, de vuelta a la pregunta. Si no tuviera que trabajar, si yo no tuviera que trabajar, ¿cómo lo harían en pasado? Bueno, sí, ¿cómo harían la pregunta, right? En inglés.
Teacher, maybe what would you do if you weren't have to work?
Poco porque cuando uso were es el to be que no tiene nada que ver con los otros verbos en pasado.
Oh,
Guys,
yeah.
ahí estoy, le estoy usando el mismo. Nico, ¿qué dices?
I don't know if
If
you
you shouldn't,
have to work. I don't know.
¿Cuál es el pasado de esto?
Didn't.
Didn't, yes, exactly, muy bien.
Have to
Entonces,
work.
guys, recuerden que es pasado simple y en el pasado simple hago las negaciones con didn't, right? Y las preguntas con did. Entonces, es el mismo que tengo acá, solo que en pasado. What would you do if you didn't have to work, right? Ya la respuesta, bueno, si yo no tuviese que trabajar, if I didn't have to work, I would play every day, ta, 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 I would spend with my family, no sé qué, right? Pero if I didn't have to work, pasado simple. ¿Listo? Ahora, si yo no fuera, ahí sí sería if I weren't, ¿cierto? Por ejemplo, si yo no fuera profesor, if I weren't a teacher, pero recuerden que el weren't usualmente va a ir solito, excepto en ejemplos como este que vimos acá de past continuous, pero pues no es muy común, pero puede pasar, pero el verbo iría en ing, pero normalmente cuando uso if I weren't, no uso más verbos, uso simplemente otra, digamos, un adjetivo, una característica, o en este caso una profesión. If I weren't a teacher, I would be, I should, wait. If I weren't a teacher, I would be a psychologist, maybe. Possibly. A psychologist. ¿Ok? Entonces, if I weren't a teacher, I would be a psychologist. ¿Ya? Ahí sí, la negación es directamente con weren't, porque es si yo no fuera. Pero si es otro verbo cualquiera, si yo no tuviera que trabajar, si yo no viviera en Colombia, si yo no hablara español, ¿cierto? Todos esos, if I did. ¿Listo, guys? ¿Ready? ¿Un poquito mejor?
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
Clear.
Listo, guys. Son simples reglas del pasado simple que a veces se nos olvidan, pero pues es bueno tenerlas ahí en cuenta también para este tipo de usos, ¿vale? Pero pues nada grave que no podamos repasar, ¿listo? Bueno, my dear people, entonces, hoy en foco, digamos que estaba en would. Yo sé que se puede usar con could y con may, pero el foco estaba en would. Ahora, tenemos clase el jueves, ¿sí? ¿El jueves? No, mañana. No, ¿el jueves?
pues
Yes, yes.
Jueves. ¿Jueves a las 8? Sí,
sí, profe.
eso.
Sí, profe.
Entonces, la pregunta, solo tienen que hacer una cosita pequeña, cortica, chiquita. Quiero que busquen a ver si de pronto, o si ustedes de pronto se acuerdan. Si no se acuerdan, no problem, nada pasa. ¿Cuál es el pasado de should y cuál es el pasado de would? ¿Vale? ¿Cuál es el pasado del verbo would y cuál es el pasado del verbo should? Eso es todo lo que tienen que hacer para el jueves, ¿vale? No more. Para terminar esta semana número 11. ¿Listo? Entonces, basically, that would be all for today, guys. Thank you for everything and see you in 2 days. Okay? See you on Thursday at 8 p.m., guys. Have a wonderful night and sleep tight and see you on 2 days. Okay?
Okay, teacher.
Thank
Goodbye.
you,
Bye
Thank
teacher.
you,
bye. You're
teacher.
Goodbye. Have a
welcome.
good night.
Good night.
You
Thank you,
too.
teacher.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.